Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Who wants to pray us in? Brian?
He just shoved food in his mouth.
Perfect. You want me to pray?
Go on, Pastor, pause.
Go ahead.
I'll pray.
Don's got it.
Thank you, Lord, for this time that we can get together and get into your word and learn from you. And just thank you that everything went well with Janine's parents' move
Yeah.
and Tim's surgery. We just pray for continued healing there, Lord. And just, we want to learn from you tonight, Lord. We just thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, if you don't have it memorized, turn to John chapter 20, verse 30. Who's that?
Tanya.
Tanya's back. I suppose you told everybody and I missed it, huh?
A little bit here and there, but I've been stalking you online though. I have been watching your videos.
Good. I've never been so happy to be stalked ever once. That's good. John 20, verse 30. You ready to say it?
Yep.
Yeah.
No.
Therefore, many other
Many other signs.
Jesus.
Jesus
Also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in Zoe life in his name.
Zoe life.
Zoe life.
Zoe life. Okay, that you may believe that Jesus is the
Messiah.
Messiah, right? Remember, we're untranslating that and making it Hebrew again, so we're putting a red M on it for Messiah.
Jewish Messiah.
Yes, yes. Okay, so all that tells us is that, remember, there were so many signs that John could have written down. He said not even the libraries of the world could contain the books. And so he's whittled all of those down to these signs because each of these signs fit his criteria, that we're going to believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, that we're going to have Zoe life, which means what?
Life in proximity.
Close proximity.
Proximity to the Father.
Yep. And in them believing, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we got that one. Okay, so up to this point, as we're in John, like up through chapter 3, we've only seen John the Baptist being a sign as the forerunner, right?
Yep.
We've seen the sign of Jesus seeing Nathanael under the tree. And we saw the water turned into wine. And remind me, who saw that?
Servants.
The servants and the disciples.
Yeah. And then in John 3, Nicodemus came to him and said, we know that you're a teacher from God because no one can do these signs. So I think that's really interesting because John wanted to tell us the signs that would cause us to believe that Jesus is the Messiah. What Nicodemus saw were signs that caused him to believe that Jesus was a teacher from God. And so John didn't record those. He was like, nope, those aren't the ones I want. But we do know that Jesus had been running around doing signs that weren't in this book because Nicodemus talked about them.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So we've gone up through chapter 3, most of it, and I want to skip the last half of 3 for now. It's kind of about judging, and there's another chapter that's going to come up and deal with that. So I want to do that all together in one piece. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to hop on over to chapter 4, and we're going to start there tonight.
Everybody but what's his name?
Yeah.
Okay,
What's his face?
chapter 4.
Chapter 4.
All right.
This week's 6.
Okay. So we're remembering that John's different in that he gives interpretation. The other gospels don't. We're remembering that John continually talks about realer than real, that there's realer than real light. There's realer than real water. There's realer than real life. And there's going to be several of those as we go through. Those are the things we're kind of looking out for. And then as we get into chapter 4, there's going to be a lot of all that. All the stuff that we've been looking for kind of comes together in chapter 4. I want us to start in verse 3 because the first two verses really belong to chapter 3. So he left Judea and went into Galilee, and he had to pass through Samaria. So as we get into chapter 4, there's two main things we have to pay attention to. First is Samaria. Remember, we're double underlining with green the geographical locations. And this says he had to pass through Samaria. So the first off that we come into this story is to know that there's something funny about Samaria that would make Jesus say that he had to pass through it. Hang on, I'm going to screen share. And I have a map. I was kind of hoping, let's see. Woo, it might work. It just might work. You guys still see me, right?
Yep,
Yep.
we see your screen.
Oh, where'd my map go? Hang on. Oh, there it is. Got it?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So when it says that he had to pass through Samaria, I want you to notice that Judea's down here in the south, and that's where Jerusalem is. Galilee's up here, and that's where Jesus is from. And in the middle is Samaria. So there's these three, we're going to call them states. They weren't technically, but at different points of history, they had different kings or they had different governors throughout the whole thing. But Israel in the time of the New Testament was divided into three sections: Galilee in the north, Samaria in the middle, and Judea in the south. Does everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now there's a problem with this map because over here, right on the coastline, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, cool. On the coastline, there was a strip of land that didn't belong to Samaria. Even though it was in here, it belonged to Galilee. So you could actually get from Galilee to Judea without touching Samaria if you're willing to come all the way over to the ocean and scoot on down. But if someone was in a hurry or for some reason needed to get there quicker, then they had to pass through Samaria. So at the tail end of chapter 3, Jesus was in Judea. He wanted to go to Galilee, and the word says that he had to pass through. So he wasn't going to go over on the side and take the little strip. He was heading straight through. And when we get to John chapter 4, the story takes place right here in Shechem or Sychar, the same town. You see it where it is there?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have it? I'm going to stop sharing if you're good with it.
Good
Yep.
with it.
Okay. But that helps you get in your head and see where we're going with this.
Right.
So as we're getting to chapter 4, you guys pretty much know the story. It's the woman at the well. We'll get into it and read it in depth, but we pretty much know this one. But there's two underlying currents behind the whole thing. There's like this subplot going on that we need to understand. Otherwise, we don't get what's going on in John chapter 4. And the first is that it's in Samaria. So let's go back in our heads to the Old Testament. So we're going to scoot on back, keep going in your head further back to the time when Israel was a united nation. Not like United Nations, but a united nation, a one nation nation.
Oh, okay. Before the split.
Yes, before the split. So for a short period, Israel was united under a king before there was actually a civil war and Israel split into two separate countries. There were three kings. Who knows them?
Oh, Saul, David, and Solomon.
Yes. Very, very good. So that's the United Kingdom time frame where all of Israel, what we call now Israel, was all under one king. Saul, David, Solomon. But when Solomon died, his son Rehoboam was in line to be king. And I know you guys know this because we've been over it before, but there was, when Rehoboam became king, he was like, how should I reign? What should I do? What kind of guy should I be? And so he had two sets of advisors. One were the old guys that were friends of his dad, Solomon. And the other set of advisors, I call them his frat buddies. They were young and stupid. So he had these two advisors, and the old guys said, you should rule just like your dad did. Let's don't change anything. Let's just keep everything the way it was. But the young guys were like, dude, you know, and all the young guy voices. And they were like, you've got an opportunity here for money, I think you should go rule them really hard and try to get as much tax money out of them as you can. And so he was presented with these two choices. And of course, he chose the young guys. So he went to Israel, like he's just freshly king, and he goes to the whole country and says, my dad ruled you with a rod of iron. I'm going to rule you even harder. And you remember this?
Yep.
That I have more power in my pinky than my dad had altogether. And I'm going to rule you with a rod of iron. Let's go find that. So turn in your Bibles, if you brought them with, to 1 Kings chapter 12. So of course, after he said, I'm going to rule you with a rod of iron, the people were like, I don't think I want that. And so because of his stubbornness and because of his listening to wrong advisors and making a bad choice, Israel split up into two separate countries. Did you guys know that?
No.
Yeah.
North and
Yeah.
south.
Yes, it turned into America and Canada, basically, just two separate countries that ended up warring against each other and not liking each other. But let's get a running start into this. 1 Kings chapter 12. Is that what I said?
Yeah.
Okay. 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Kings.
Well,
First Kings 12. Did everybody see Kat's mom's on?
Yeah.
Hi, Kat's
Welcome.
mom. And my friend Lynn is on. There, say hi, Lynn.
Good evening.
First Kings 12. Nicole, I left my Bible at Bible study last night, so
I
I'm
saw
happy
that.
to, like,
I
I don't
know.
know where anything is in this thing.
I know. When Rachel said, "Can you come by tonight?" I thought she probably can't because of this.
Yeah. I can't. All right, First Kings. So when they were splitting, it was because of this deal that poor old Rehoboam did, but there was an upstart. Because now if we're going to split into two separate countries, there have to be two separate kings. And I'm not going to get into the whole backstory of the other king, but his name sadly was Jeroboam. So we've got Rehoboam and Jeroboam, just to further confuse us. So Jeroboam took the north, which would be Samaria today. In fact, he made Samaria the capital and took that piece of land, and he took 10 of the 12 tribes. There were 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel that said, yeah, we don't want to be under Rehoboam. We don't like that idea of the pinky thing. We don't want to pay him more than we've been previously paying. And when this civil war happened, it wasn't a straight 50-50 split. 10 of the tribes went with Jeroboam to the north and became the country called Israel. And 2 of the tribes went with Rehoboam, and they stayed in the south where Jerusalem is, in the area that's currently known, or in the New Testament known as Judea, down in with Jerusalem. So this split happened. Well, Jeroboam wanted to make some serious changes. He didn't want to just be Jews living in the north and Jews living in the south. He wanted Israel, or the Jews living in the north, to be very, very different. So let's go to 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 25. All of chapter 12 is the split, so you guys can read that on your own. The division, there was a near war, but God said, nope, 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 this is my idea, so don't fight over it. So verse 25 of 1 Kings 12, then Jeroboam, that's the king of Israel, built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there, and went out from there and built Penuel. Okay, so all of those words are going to show up later in prophetic books. All of those words are the Shechem and Ephraim and Jeroboam and Penuel. And if you remember later when you're reading prophetic books, if you remember, this is the origin of those words and those cities, that they were the part that split off, that they followed after Jeroboam. When you see him showing up in Joel, you won't have to wonder why is God so mad at him. He's mad at him because of this. He's mad at him because this happened. So verse 25, Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. And he went out from there and built Penuel. Now, here's Jeroboam's problem. Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will return to the house of David. He was worried he was going to lose his followers. He said, if this people goes up to offer sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then the heart of this people will return to their Lord. It'll return even to Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me, and they're going to return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So his problem was, really, we can't be Jewish anymore. Because if I let them be Jewish, they're going to end up wanting to be Jewish. They're going to go back down to Jerusalem. They're going to want to go back to the temple. They're going to want to go, not the temple. Yeah, temple. They're going to want to go back to the temple. They're going to want to worship or follow after King Rehoboam. And so he's like, I've got to do something about this. So his plan was to make sure that nobody in his territory was Jewish. So now when I talk about Judaism, remember that there's genetically descended, which they were, genetically descended Jews, but there's also religiously observant, which they weren't. Okay, you get it?
Right.
Okay, being Jewish is genetic and it's observance. So these guys were genetically descended Jews that were living in the north with Jeroboam, but he made sure they weren't religiously observant. Let's see what he did. So, verse 28, the king consulted and he made 2 golden calves. And he said to the people, oh, you guys, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold, your gods. He made it sound like he was doing them a favor. Like, oh, it's kind of a tough trip. But here's some gods. You don't have to go to Jerusalem. Here are your gods. And these 2 calves brought you up from the land of Egypt. So he put one in Bethel and another one he put in Dan on 2 ends of his kingdom. Now, this thing became a sin. Verse 30 says, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. And Jeroboam made houses on high place. High place means a worship place. So he set up new areas in which to worship, new holy places. And he made priests from among all the people who were not of the sons of Levi. Everybody go, oh. Yeah. So if we're worshiping calves, if we're not worshiping in the temple, if we have priests that aren't from the descendants of Levi, can we call ourselves Jewish?
It's a cult.
Yep, pretty much. He started a new religion.
Yeah.
Not only that, look what else he did. Verse 32, Jeroboam instituted a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like the feast which was in Judah. And he went up to his altar, thus he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves which he had made. And he stationed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. And he went up on the altar which he had made in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised in his own heart. And he instituted a feast for the sons of Israel and went up to the altar to burn incense. Did you see all the things which he had made, which he instituted, which he had made? He sat there and made up a religion to keep his people busy so they wouldn't go back to Judaism. And the goofballs fell for it.
I've got a question.
I got a question too.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I've got to wrap my head around I feel dizzy here. Isn't his dad, King Solomon, the one who wrote Proverbs?
This is Jeroboam.
This is the other one. This
Oh.
is Jeroboam.
Yep. So yes, Rehoboam is still in what's now going to be called Judah. It's not Israel anymore. So when Israel split into 2 separate countries, Israel became the bad guy country and Judah became where the Jews were, the good guy country.
Both of them is limited to 2 tribes, and that's not what we were just talking about.
I got a question.
Wait, let me see. Does that Does that answer it?
Yeah, yes.
Jeroboam's an upstart. He's not related to anybody. He shouldn't be a king at all. You can back up a couple chapters and see that a prophet approached him and said, "You're going to be king," and
Because it
gave him a
sounds
chance to be a holy king, but he wasn't.
Sounds a lot like Solomon's son, who took over when Solomon died, and he was kind of a cockroach too, where he didn't listen to his dad's cronies, he listened to the kids.
Right.
That's where I was confused.
Yes, that's what he did for sure. Yes.
Rehoboam.
Rehoboam is Solomon's kid and not a great guy, but
Yeah,
not as bad as Jeroboam.
oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Jeroboam had the 10 of the 12 tribes, and he's the one that had to do the counts and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, Brian.
All right.
I was just wondering, how long did this perpetuate? Because when Jesus met the Samaritan woman, he says, "You worship what you don't know."
Oh,
And I'm wondering, were they still doing the golden calves at that point, or they had progressed to other things? Or were they-
Progress to other things, but we'll get there in a minute. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Because everything she says to him is wrong. It's kind of like Nicodemus last time, where everything that Nicodemus came and said was just this much wrong. And what she says is wrong too. And he's like, you don't even know. Because everything that she was saying was what Jeroboam had made up. He made it up. Okay, so are we good?
yeah,
So he made a feast. It says that he made a feast on the 8th month of the 15th day. Now we're already through Leviticus by this time, right? Leviticus is in the back or the front. We're past that. And that's in chapter 23 where God instituted all the feasts. God's feast is on the 7th month on the 15th day. So not only did Jeroboam bring us idols and a false god, he's bringing us new temple and holy areas and new days, new feasts and festivals. So they're not Jewish anymore. Is everybody good?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. His capital was Samaria. So when we're talking about this division of north and south, it's even still a little different than what I showed you on the map. But Judea is still down in the south and Samaria is the north. The northern kingdoms were in the north and the capital was Samaria. So this is going to start ringing some bells for you as we go through that. Okay, wait a minute. All these people that went with the northern kingdom ended up being bad. They turned their backs on Judaism. They are going to eventually, a little bit as I read to you, going to turn their backs even on their ethnicity, even their genetically descended Judaism part. And so there was bad blood between the Jews of Judea in the south and anybody in Samaria in the north. So when it says in John that Jesus had to go through Samaria and that there was this shocking thing that he talked to the Samaritans, it's because of all this stuff that's going on back in 1 Kings.
nice background, thank you.
Yeah.
There's more.
All
There we
right.
How'd I find this stuff, you guys?
Google.
Google.
Stop it.
Maybe
Yeah. College, maybe so.
Just kidding.
Okay. So he made all this new religion, all this new stuff. Let's see, I'm going to skip that part. Go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 15. As you're turning there, let me remind you that 1st and 2nd Kings covers the same time period that 1st and 2nd Chronicles do. They cover them from a different perspective. 1st and 2nd Kings kind of read like somebody's journal. This is what happened now. This is what happened now. And this is what happened now. 1st and 2nd Chronicles reads like a history book. 1st and 2nd Chronicles is looking back at the events from more than 100 years perspective and writing about not only what happened, but what effect it had. But they cover the same period of time. And they both are written in a way that they're jumping from a king in Judah to a king in Samaria or a king in Israel, down to a king in Judah and a king in Israel. And all 4 of these books go back and forth like this. And when I was studying them the first time, I found it to be confusing. So what worked for me, and I'm just letting you know in case it'll work for you, is I just used the headings in my Bible And I went through, for instance, First Kings, just reading what happened in Israel. And then I get a timeline in my head. And then I went back to the beginning of First Kings and just read, using the headings of my Bible, just read what went on in Judea. So now I know what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Judea. And then the third time through, I read it with them combined. So you could kind of see how the events were overlapping in both kingdoms. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
You
Just
said First and
question.
Second Chronicles reads like a history book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you say First and Second Kings reads like?
A journal.
A journal, thank you.
Because they would use dates, they would reference a date that happened in Judea with a king that was in Israel. That's the confusing part.
Right.
They would say in this king's reign, this happened in Judah, but it was
Yes.
two different kingdoms. So
Yes.
that, and then they did that consistently all the way down the line, and that's what's confusing, I know.
Yeah, I agree. It makes more sense after you learn the timeline separately and then pop them back together. At least it does for me. So you guys can try it however you want. All right, where are we going? What did I say?
Second
Kings
Kings.
15.
Something.
Yeah,
Second Kings, I think 17.
I'm thinking it's Second Kings 15:28. Hang on, let me go back to my notes. Yeah, you're right. I did say 27, but let's go. Second Kings 15, let's go to, 27. Here's an example of what Brian was saying. In the 52nd year of a king of Judah, a different guy became king in Israel. You see what it's doing?
Yeah.
Those things are hard to track with, but that's what's going on. So this new king became king in Israel and he reigned for 20 years. So the new king, whose name was Pekah, did evil in the sight of the Lord. Just so you know, every king over Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. There wasn't a good one in the bunch. Throughout the history of Israel, there were 19 kings, and all of them did evil in the sight of the Lord. So 28, he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had made Israel sin. So I think, Brian, was it you who said, are they still doing the calves? And they were then,
Yeah.
even though we've had time go by. So in the days of Pekah, king of Israel, the bad guy, king of Assyria, so that's a totally different country. That's a bad guy country. The king of Assyria came and captured. These are cities that are in Assyria. Nope. Yes. No. Cities that are in Israel. Sorry. The Assyrian king came and captured these cities: Ijon and Ebel Beth Makkah and Jonah and Kedash and Hazar and Gilead and Galilee and all the land of Naphtali. So those are the cities he captured in Israel. And then it says he carried them off into carried them captive to Assyria. So Assyria is this separate warring country, and he came in and swooped through Israel with the bad guys and carried them off into captivity in Assyria. This happened more than once. So this is like the first wave. So let's look at chapter 17, verse 5, 2 Kings 17, verse 5. Now we've got a new king, it's Ahaz. He was the worst of all who did evil in the sight of the Lord, but now Ahaz is king in Israel. Verse 5 says, then the king of Assyria invaded the whole land. So when we read it before, it was just those 4 or 5 cities. Now Assyria comes back and they invade the whole land and went up to Samaria and besieged it for 3 years. Then in the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and carried Israel away into exile. Okay, so that happened, in case you care, in the year 722 BC. So we've got Israel being United Kingdom. And then it divided into Israel in the north and Judea in the south. And right now we got to the part where Israel is carried away into Assyrian captivity? Can you see it? Those who've been around for the
Not
Old
really.
Testament story class, you probably, pardon me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So they are carried off. Look at, go back to 1 Kings 12, just for kicks. 1 Kings 12, verse 19. 1 Kings 12, 19. All of this is tying into John 4, I promise. 1 Kings 12, 19. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. And of course, it doesn't mean to this day, right? What day does it mean?
That day.
That day.
Yes, to the day it was written. So Israel, the northern kingdoms, were in rebellion against David, which is Jerusalem and Judea, for years and years and years and years. Hundreds of years. They were in rebellion. So it wasn't just that, oh, we're going to live up here and we're going to live down here. They warred. They were different religions. And the bummer part is they're still related, right? They're still cousins. Yes, nod,
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah. because they're all descended from one of the 12 tribes. They're all cousins. So it's really sad to think about how it's playing out and what's happening as this goes on. So now the northern ones are carried off into Assyria. Jerusalem and the southern kingdom stays for a little bit while longer. We're not concerned with that part of the story so much tonight. But I also want you to know what happened after they were carried off into Assyria. So because of that, look at 2 Kings 17. Let's go to verse 24. So the way the king of Assyria took over a land, he didn't care about the land. He just wanted the people. And so he took the people away and took them to Assyria. And we don't really know what their life was like. We don't have a lot of information like we do what was going on with the other ones. Are you guys being silly?
Oh,
Brian
No.
is.
she's trying to drink my water.
Yeah. I wanted to share.
All right. 2 Kings 17:24. The king of Assyria, so now we're talking about that foreign country, right, that came and got him. The king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cuthoth and from Ava, from the south of those other towns, and settled them in the cities of Samaria in place of the sons of Israel. So now foreigners are in the land. Okay. So these foreigners possessed Samaria and lived in its cities. At the beginning of their living there, they did not fear the Lord. Of course they wouldn't. Therefore, the Lord sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So they spoke to the king of Assyria, saying, that nation whom you've carried away into exile in the cities of Samaria, well, we don't know the customs of the God of that land. So he sent lions among them, and behold, they kill them because they don't know the custom of the God of the land. So then, this is hilarious to me. The king of Assyria commanded, saying, well then, take with you to Samaria some of the priests whom you carried away into exile, and let him go live there, and let the priests teach the people in the land the customs of the God of the land. Okay, they carried away priests. What's a priest in Samaria?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, not a Levite.
Man-made.
Yes, all completely made up. Yeah, probably used to teaching them how to worship golden calves.
Right.
And Naphtali, but he was like, well, this is obviously a God problem. So go get you a priest and bring him down and they'll teach you how to be there. So verse 28, so one of the priests whom they carried away into exile from Samaria came and lived in Bethel, and he taught them how they should fear the Lord. But every nation still made gods of its own and put them in the houses of the high places which the people of Samaria had made, and every nation in their cities which they had lived. So it's completely contaminated. Okay, so now what we know is after the split, our cousins went up and lived in the north, but they stopped being religiously observant Jews. And then because of that, they got carried off into captivity. And then the land was populated with foreigners who sometimes got eaten by lions and who are trying to make it there. So we've got all of this history bringing it into John chapter 4.
Wow.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, all of this is explaining why there's a parable about the Good Samaritan. Like it would be a weird thing because the Good Samaritan to them would have been a weird thing.
But
Right.
we're also looking at like 600 years difference.
Mhm.
And so Samaria had a lot of Greeks there, right?
Yes. So New Testament, 600 years difference?
Yeah. Am I right?
Yeah, it would be,
700?
yeah, 7.5. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's more to pile onto it. But I just kind of want to show you what's the deal with why John even said Jesus had to go through Samaria. Why is that? Why wasn't it just Jesus went through Samaria? It was that he had to. It was something that they really weren't keen on doing. He had to do it.
Was Nazareth when Nathaniel said, "Can anything good come from there?" Was that part of the?
We'll get there.
Oh,
Get
okay.
there.
Slow down.
All right, so now we're up in our Old Testament brain in the history. Now we've got foreigners living in Assyria. The southern kingdom was still intact for another 150
Right.
years. Yeah, Judea. So the southern kingdom, the two tribes that were still under David's descendants' rules, they still were Jews. They still had the temple, but even they didn't obey. And so eventually they too were carried off into Babylonian captivity. A story for another night. A different country came and got them. But for them, after 70 years, the southern kingdom turned around and came back. Here's something I want you to know. The Syrians, the Jews who were carried away into Syrian captivity, never came back. If you think about the Jews that we see in the New Testament, when their tribes are mentioned, what tribes are they?
Judea
Judea,
tribes.
Benjamin.
Two tribes.
Yep. Because Jesus is from the tribe of
Judea.
Judea.
Judah, and Saul, tribe of,
Benjamin.
yeah.
I read lips.
In the New Testament, you don't hear anybody being from the tribe of Issachar or Dan or Naphtali.
No.
They didn't come back. There's no Zebulun tribe. They, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, you're
You
right.
think-
Yep,
Okay.
I'm agreeing with you. They're not.
Yep, they're not there. There's one mention of one lady from the tribe of Asher. And she's an anomaly for sure. She's the only one of the 10, they call them the lost tribes, that's ever mentioned in the New Testament. And she was Anna, the old priest that was standing in the temple waiting for baby Jesus to come. Do you remember her?
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah, she was from the tribe of Asher.
What
But other
about
than that, they're not part of the story anymore, because once they were carried into Assyrian captivity, that's where they stayed. That's where they are now.
What about the
That's-
Levites? Any mention of them?
Yep, good question. Yes, in the New Testament there are. Now, if you remember back into like the book of Judges and shortly into Joshua, when they were dividing up the land among the tribes,
Mhm.
remember that the Levites didn't get a hunk of land.
No.
They got a little bit of everybody's land. And the reason for that was God wanted everybody that was in Israel at that time to have access to a priest. So they wouldn't have to go all the way down to Jerusalem if they wanted to have access to a priest. At least they've got the Levites scattered around. So when the Civil War happened and it turned into two countries, the Levites who were in the south still had access to the temple, so they could still do sacrifices, they could still do all the feasts and festivals. And so they kind of liked it. But because the Levites in the north weren't really associated with those tribes, they trickled down. So it ended up that when everything settled, when all the dust settled, the southern kingdom was the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin, and most of Levites.
Okay.
Most of those guys. So that's what kind of translates then into the New Testament. Those three tribes are mentioned. Now, when I say New Testament, I'm meaning the story of the New Testament, because in Revelation, it tells us that those tribes are still going to come back. That still is going to happen. God knows where all of those lost 10 tribes are, and they're still going to come back. So that's something to be cool to think about too. All right, so now we've got, is everybody good?
Yep.
All right, so now we've gone through history. The Southern Kingdom was carried off into captivity and they started to come back. And when they came back, they did two things. They rebuilt the temple and rebuilt the walls. But let me tell you, by the time they came back and started rebuilding the temple and rebuilding the walls, the people who'd been living in Samaria had kind of come down, and now they started causing big trouble for the Jews who went back to the land. I always call them nasty neighbors. So when Ezra came back and wanted to start rebuilding the temple, and when Nehemiah came back and wanted to start rebuilding the walls, there were nasty neighbors there that caused nothing but trouble. They acted as vandals. Once they built something, these bad guys would come in and break it. They whined and complained. They wrote letters to the king saying, do you know what's going on here? And the king was like, yeah, I know, but letters take a long time. So that was a period of 3 years waiting for letters to go and come back, that all the progress was stopped. They acted like bullies. What are you saying?
Nothing.
Joe. Okay, so let's look at Ezra, the book of Ezra, chapter 4. So Ezra's part of the Southern Kingdom that goes back to start rebuilding the temple and make it beautiful. I love Ezra. He's one of my favorite guys ever. 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra. Ezra 4. So this is the good Jews coming back to start rebuilding the temple after the Babylonians had smushed it 70 years prior. Ezra chapter 4, starting in verse 1. Now, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people of exile were building a temple to the Lord God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of the fathers' households and said to them, okay, so Zerubbabel's Ezra, really. He's the leader. He's not Ezra, but he's one of the leaders. Okay, so did you get all that? 4:1. Now, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin, who's the enemies of Judah and Benjamin?
The rest of the tribes.
The other 10
Yeah.
tribes.
Yes, and these weirdo people living in Samaria. So when they heard that the people of the exile were building a temple to the Lord God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of the fathers' households and said to them, let us build with you, for we, like you, seek your God. And we have been sacrificing to him since the days of that guy, the king of Assyria, who brought us up here. They haven't been sacrificing to him. But they came, they were mad, and they came and said, let's help. Can we help? We want to help. And they were pulling on the idea that we're just like you. Let us help. You guys see it?
Yeah.
Not
Subterfuge.
that way, but yeah.
Verse 3, but Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' households of Israel said to them, you have nothing in common with us in building a house to our God, but we ourselves will together build to the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us. So then the people of the land, since they couldn't build with them, the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and frightened them from building. And they hired counselors against them to frustrate their counsel all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So that's the nasty neighbors, and they're Samaritans. The Jews in the New Testament had all this in their heads. When they hear the word Samaria, they instantly summon up all this history that we just went through. So this explains why they didn't like them. You guys seeing this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense now.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
good. So I said that Ezra came back to rebuild the temple. Nehemiah came back to rebuild the walls. So let's look at Nehemiah chapter 4. Oh, Nehemiah chapter 2, sorry. More nasty neighbors who are Samaritans. Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 9. I always remember Nehemiah because he's working on his knees to rebuild the wall. That's my mnemonic device for Nehemiah. So it lists, let's see. Nehemiah is so cool too. He gets all the stuff from, yeah, anyway. Verse 19, this is listing the names of the bad guys. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official and Gershon the Ahab heard that we were rebuilding, I'm inserting the rebuilding there because that's what that chapter is about. They mocked us. The Samaritans mocked Nehemiah and the other Israelites or Judeans. They mocked us and despised us and said, "What is this thing you are doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" So I, Nehemiah, answered them and said to them, "The God of heaven gives us success. Therefore, we, his servants, will arise and build. But you, Samaritans, have no portion, no right, or no memorial in Jerusalem." So that's what he told them.
Okay.
They have no portion, no right, no memorial that's got anything to do with this. So there, we just went through a whole bunch of Old Testament history. Is your head hurt? Or are you okay?
Right. Perfect.
Okay, good. So all of that plays into Jesus sitting on a stone bench outside the city well. All of that plays into the mind of an ostracized woman who comes out to get water that day. And all of that we just read is in the minds of the guys when they come back with food for Jesus and see him sitting there talking to one of them. That's what's going on. That's why it says he had to go through Samaria, and that's why the disciples were so shocked when they came back and saw him talking to her. Even she was shocked, right? How is it that you, a Jew, would talk to me? The whole thing was shocking all around. The only one who wasn't shocked was Jesus. He was kind of tickled. So let's go to John 4. You guys aren't talking very much tonight. Is everything okay?
Yeah,
we're absorbing.
We're absorbing,
Okay.
yeah.
When there's a lot of information,
Yeah.
it's like, whoa, you know, you
Yeah.
gotta think about it more.
They might be kind of tired from all the pasta and bread too.
Yeah.
It might be time to what?
The pasta they had before.
All that bread.
It's starting to sit a little heavy, is it?
I feel great.
I was just thinking about when Jesus was in Samaria with the woman and all these people came out and he stayed there 2 days. And I don't know if it was at that point, it said, but he told the disciples, look at the harvest, you know, and he mentioned that the other people, the old people, the people a long time ago did all the hard work. You've got the easy work.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, and it just reminded me of all the years of persecution trying to build the temple, of all that going on. And I was thinking that maybe that was one of the things that Jesus was talking about, all the plowing that they did back then
Yeah, I agree.
to try to hold on to what they had.
Yep. And feeling so, had to have been backstabbed feeling to be like, you're my cousin. You know, that first generation came through, you know, they knew all the miracles and yet they're going to go worship calves. How terrible. Okay. So in John chapter 4, that's one of the underlying currents that we have to understand in order to understand what goes on in John chapter 4. The other one is women, or in this case, a woman. So I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but it's got to come up again, and not because I want it to, but because we're in John chapter 4, and that's part of what's going on. You can't move on from this without recognizing that not only was it shocking that Jesus stopped and talked to a Samaritan, but that he talked to a woman.
Yep.
What else did he do with the woman? That sounded terrible. Sorry.
He asked her to drink
Some water.
Yep.
Sip of life of the water, like
Agua.
the.
Yep.
Yeah.
Living water.
He prophesied over her.
Yep.
Yeah.
Look at verse 26, 4:26. What did he do?
Oh, he.
Yeah, he declared he's a Messiah.
He hadn't even said that to the disciples yet.
I know.
So he told it to a woman, and then what did she do?
She got the whole town out.
Yes,
Buddy.
she went out and taught the other people. She went into the city and said to the man, come and see the prophet, or the man who told me all the things that I've done. So we've got to talk about this too.
Yes.
So one of the things, again, let's go backwards in our head a little bit, not quite as far this time. Let's go to the 400 years between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament. Okay, so basically, a lot of times they're called 400 years of silence because there's no stories written about what went on there. But there's a lot of history that went on during those 400 years. And of course, we can't cover it all now. But one of the things that I do want to cover is that the Romans the Greeks came in. There were some others that came in too, but the Greeks came in and took over everything. So we'd already seen the Assyrians coming in, taking over everything. We already learned tonight that the Babylonians came in and took over everything. There was mention made in one of the verses in Nehemiah about the Persians coming in. All of this, there's all this political upheaval that's going on. But during that 400 years in between, the Greeks came in. And there's literally, according to history books, not just my opinion, there's not a more misogynistic culture than the Greeks. And misogynistic means haters of women.
Right. Yeah.
Their writing is stacked with terrible, awful, disgusting things that they say about women, and not just say, but actually believed and implemented. So you want to hear a few of them? I always think they're funny to read.
Yeah.
When you're not crying, they're funny to read.
You're right.
Yeah. Aristotle, you guys have heard of him.
Mhm.
Women or male is by nature superior, female is inferior. Males should rule and females should submit. Okay, is that in the Bible, in the Old Testament?
No.
No.
I mean, when we look at the Old Testament, we see, we can't get into the whole thing, but we see God creating woman as a helpmeet, which means an equal with different skills. I do this because the word means to mirror or to look at each other. In the Old Testament, we see women owning land. In the Old Testament, we see women having a right to divorce their husband if he didn't give them enough clothes or give them enough attention, which I think is funny criteria. There's women in ministry in the Old Testament. There were women who led battles.
Judges.
There were judges who were women. There were prophets who were women. A woman named Hilkiah saved the word of God, saved it. Single-handedly saved the actual scrolls of the word of God. So when we get into anything where we're taught, or it seems to be taught that women aren't as much, or whatever, we have to really look and see where that came from. Did it come from the Old Testament? Because no. So there's got to be another intervening factor, and the intervening factor is the Greek culture.
Mhm.
So Aristotle said that women are inferior. It gets worse than that. A playwright called Simon Adeo said women are animals. They depict all the forces of chaos. Women are highly sexual and cannot control themselves.
Right. Who was this that said that? Right.
Simon Adeo is his name. He said that women are consumers of men. Women consume men.
Yeah, right.
Never mind.
And he summed it up by saying that women are the instigator of all the evil in the world.
Oh.
Yep. Euripides bemoaned the fact that if there was only a way to get sons other than through female sex. Life would be rid of all its miseries if women didn't exist.
Oh, that's what they're trying
So in
to
other
do
words, they
now.
like
Transgender.
Yeah.
Is that in the Bible?
Oh,
No.
no.
No, that's
Right?
not an
Oh.
Old Testament thought. It's a Greek cultural thought. It's not a New Testament thought either, you guys. This is something that's completely foreign and outside of God's realm, but it was this culture that was squeezing its way in.
Thanks, Jeroboam.
Yeah, serious.
Really?
Plato, you guys know Plato. He said bad men are reincarnated as women.
Oh.
You guys better be good. Turn out like us.
Wait until you know who I used to be.
And you know, what did Lori say?
Wait till you know who I used to be.
You guys know in Greek mythology, Pandora was the first woman. She was created by Zeus, and then what'd she do?
Open the box.
She opened the box and let she couldn't control herself. She couldn't at all wait or have patience. She had to open the box when she was told not to, and she let all evil and misery out into the world. So Greeks thought women were the source of all evil and misery.
Oh, gosh. Wow.
And I can imagine the land of Samaria,
Yeah, I know, I was like.
because it was full of Greeks,
Mhm.
and the Greeks had, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of gods.
Yep.
There was a lot of unknowns going on with, because didn't they, there was no sacrifice to the Greek gods, but there was prayers and gifts or something like that. So they had a limited vision of gods back then, and this man Jesus comes, and there must have been some talk about what's going on in his travels, and he becomes this big ordeal
Mhm.
where the woman at the well, had to have not thought twice about, man, is this who we've heard of before? Is this the guy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was, oh no, that's it, sorry. I was thinking about the woman that was in the cotton adultery.
Oh,
That's a whole
Get to
other
her.
thing. Yeah.
we'll get to her. The Greeks believed women's only purpose was birthing, but they believed that the seed or the thing that creates a human comes only from man, and that the women's only purpose was to be dirt to house the seed and keep it warm. Not only that, they thought the man's seed came from his brain. And that, so they didn't understand the genetics, they didn't understand DNA, and even, so a lot of what I'm writing or reading comes from plays or philosophical writing, but Greek medical books said that
Oh,
that women, all they do is just house the seed of man. I pulled up some new ones those are my old notes.
That's the thing that they only do. I
right.
mean, like, there is no existence if they
Right.
don't have that incubator.
That's what I was, yeah.
Well, at least you're good for something.
Yeah.
Try making your own food.
Let's see. What are some fun? Oh, here's some just quick ones. A playwright and a philosopher named Menandros said, never trust your life to a woman. A woman knows nothing except what she wants to know. It's better to bury a woman than to marry her.
Oh.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wowee.
Don't trust a woman, even if she's dead.
Whoa.
And then the nicest thing he could muster, he said, a woman is silver-coated dirt.
Imagine that shocking.
Yeah.
We're buried.
Even in the culture, women weren't considered parents.
Wow.
They were child raisers, but they weren't considered a parent. And from what I read, so one in Sparta, which is one of the city states, the women had it really nice in Sparta. It was much different there for women. In Sparta, a woman could exercise, she could own land, and she could drink wine.
Oh.
So She had it made, those women in Sparta. So this too is undergirding the story in John 4. So we've got these two main invisible attributes that are having a very visible effect on what's going on. And that's Samaria and the history, the animosity, the whole context that comes with Samaria, and Jesus walking into a culture that hates women and sitting down and having a chat. So both of these things are huge in this story that we don't properly understand unless we've got this background. You guys good?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to John 4 for real now. So he's in Samaria, he's in Sychar, I showed you on the map, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph, and the well was there. And Jesus being wearied, circle it, square it, we'll do whatever, make a big deal out of the fact that Jesus was tired and had to sit. Because that's so cool. Okay. Jesus was wearied from his journey, and he was sitting thus by the well. And it was about the 6th hour, which is noon. So screaming hot. There came a woman of Samaria to draw the water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For the disciples had gone away in the city to buy food. So I want you to circle buy food and draw a line back up to weary. And draw a line up to sitting there thus, sitting thus. So he's alone, is what I want you to see. The disciples were gone, they went into town, and Jesus was so tired that he could not take another step. They had to leave him there to go into town to go get some food to bring back to him. Do you guys see that?
Mhm.
So, and it's hot, and he's sitting on a stone. And in that condition, the woman comes up and he says, "Give me a drink." Of course, he wants a drink, right?
Yeah.
So the woman right off the bat says, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink since I am a Samaritan woman?" She got both of the undercurrents right there. She understood the assignment. She was like, there are two big problems here. I'm a Samaritan and a woman. And then in parentheses, John, in his awesomeness, wrote down, "For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." What mark do you put there?
Glasses.
The glasses. Or whatever your mark is for when John interprets or gives us insight. For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. I'll say, here we just spent, 40 minutes on that, and John just reminds them with a sentence. So she said, "How come you're asking me for a drink of water?" And then Jesus said to her, "If you knew two things, one, the gift of God, and two, who I am, then you would have asked me," Jesus says, "you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." So here we've got realer than real water. Up to this point, we've had realer than real life. We've had realer than real light. And now we've got realer water than real water. There's a realer water than what you get out of a well. And that's what Jesus is talking about. Isn't this cool how he's got this theme going through the whole thing?
Yeah.
So she said, "Well, how can you get water?" It's just almost exactly like the conversation Jesus had with Nicodemus in the last chapter, right? "You must be born again." And he says, how can a man re-enter his mother's womb? Because he's thinking naturally when Jesus is thinking realer. Same thing with her. "You would have asked for living water." And she's like, "You don't even have a cup to get water." And he says, no, I'm not talking about real water. I'm talking about realer water. There's a realer water. And she said, "You are not greater than our father Jacob, are you? Who gave us this well and drank of it himself and his sons and his cattle." You can spend time and look any of that up if you want. She's not right about one word in that sentence. None of that stuff ever happened.
Really?
Yep, you can go look it up. Jesus answered and said to her, "Well, everyone who drinks of real water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the realer than real water the water that I will give him shall never thirst. So there's a realer than real thirst, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's real thirst, but then there's realer thirst. Real water fixes real thirst, but realer water has to fix realer thirst.
That's good.
Yeah.
The water I give him will become in him a well of water springing up to eternal life. The water I give him will become in him a well of water springing up to eternal life. Flip in your John sheets or your Bible, whatever you've got, to John chapter 7, verse 38. John 7, 38, because you're like, okay, so he's talking about something else. It's not water. What's he talking about? Right? John 7. Let's go to 37. John 7, 37. Now on the last day, this is the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, from his innermost being will flow rivers of Zoe water. Zoe water. Then, even at that point, we're still in John chapter 7. John wants to make sure that we all understand it. So in verse 39, he says, but this, Jesus spoke of the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive, future tense, we're going to receive. Why? For the Spirit had not yet been given because Jesus was not yet glorified. Do you see the glasses?
Yeah, right. Looking back.
Yep. So when he's talking with her, with the woman in the well, do you think he's still talking about the Holy Spirit there? I do. What do you guys think?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even these two aren't the only places where Holy Spirit is referred to as water. Okay, so here's the cool thing. Jesus said to her, if you'd known who I am, who it is who says, give me a drink. Now I'm back in verse 10. If you'd known who's saying this to you, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Okay, do you know who it was sitting there saying, give me a drink? Do you know?
What do you mean?
Messiah.
Yeah, do you know that it was Jesus sitting there talking with her?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so he says, if you'd known who I was, and you do, he says to her, she would have asked for living water.
Mhm.
Have we asked for living water? I think
Yeah.
it'd be good. I think it'd be a really fun prayer to sit around and just say, okay, I want this. If it's Holy Spirit, I want it. If it's living water, I want it. I want to never thirst again. I want to have rivers of living water bubbling up.
Yes.
Amen.
Yeah. Do you see how he's talking to us?
Mhm.
If you know who I am, this is what you ask. That's what he says. So in verse 15, she's convinced. I'll let that sit there. You guys can think on that one.
Mhm.
In verse 15, she says, okay, yeah, I want that. I want it. So I don't have to come all the way up here to get water again. In verse 15, she says, all right, so 16 has historically been read crankily. When Jesus says, yeah, right, you don't have a husband. In fact, you're sleeping around and you had 5 and you ought to be ashamed of yourself. That's pretty much how it's read most of the time.
Woman.
I'm
Yeah.
curious. I'm curious about that. Because she's living with the Greeks who hate women and she's lower than anything there is. Did she have a choice?
Very good point. Okay, so instead of reading it cranky, was Jesus ever cranky with people he ministered to?
No.
Yes.
Just patient. just
Who was he
patient.
cranky with?
Pharisees.
The religious
religious.
people.
The religious.
Yes, yes. And she's not religious, she's just a gal.
Right.
So it would be
She's just a woman.
uninterpretively correct. How's that for a phrase? It's uninterpretively correct to read this in a cranky voice is wrong.
Mm.
How would you have said this to her?
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, Jeff, you read it like that. Jeff, read it like
Please
that.
go call your husband and have him come here. That's sarcastic though, isn't it?
Well, wait till she answers and says, I have no husband. Now read it.
After that.
But sir, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, you have correctly said, I have no husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is really not your husband at all. This you have said truthfully. The woman said, Sir, I perceive that you must be a prophet. Our fathers worship.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good.
All right.
So Jeff, I want you to throw in there, oh, honey, throw that in there.
Oh, honey,
There you go.
little southern honey,
So you should have.
southern
started that way.
Assyria, honey.
She might have been
Persian.
thinking, this is my new husband again. If you got that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a new husband. He's kind of.
I mean, I think that, isn't Jesus maybe kind of trying to let on so that she understands that he doesn't know her, but he knows all about her. And so that she understands this guy's special. He knows
Yeah.
about me, but he doesn't even know me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he's also not judging her. You
Yeah,
know,
right. I
we've
would,
read
I
this,
think of it like
Right.
with my kids, if my kids came to me and I, asked them a question and then they sheepishly told me the truth, and I would want to say to them, oh, honey,
Yeah,
you're telling me the truth. Good job, basically.
yeah.
Oh, hmm,
And she's probably not used to people having actual conversations with her,
Right,
like this back and forth, where it's just not like telling them what to do. and
Compassion.
Talking down to them. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Tanya's totally right. This woman had no choice. There was no, now that doesn't excuse it. I'm not saying that, but I can see how Jesus' empathy would just really pour out for her.
Good word.
That it's not that she doesn't have a choice, is that she doesn't think she has a choice. She's not
Right.
doing this flippantly. She's not promiscuous.
Right.
Oh,
That's good.
she has no choice. Yeah, I didn't get it that way.
Yeah. So he's like, oh, I remember once a long time ago, I was watching a pastor pray for people going down the line. And he came to a guy and the guy said, I've been addicted to drugs for the last whatever years because I watched my son kill himself. And my church that I had come from previous to that, the guy would have probably smacked him around and said, well, straighten up, you have no excuse or whatever. And this pastor went, oh, no wonder you were on drugs,
Mhm.
and hugged him and then prayed for him. And that, oh my gosh, it changed me because there's mercy. We're not going to let you stay on drugs. That's not the answer. But gosh, I see why you made that choice.
Right.
Mhm.
What a hard life you've had. Let me tell you something better than drugs. Let's get you on Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a totally different approach than beating somebody when they're down.
Hmm.
And what Jesus is saying here to this woman is that, oh my gosh, you've had it rough. Let me tell you, I'm the Messiah.
It's your
There's
turn.
hope here that you don't even, there's living water now. So he's bringing her a message of compassion and of mercy.
Mhm.
Yet, don't stay that way. We want you to know that Jesus is better.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that sweet?
Yes.
And much more in line with the Jesus we know than the way we've heard this read before, where
Yeah.
he's cranky with her. He's like, poor you, honey, I can't believe this.
Mhm.
Oh,
Well, and then just the fact that he was there, I mean, we know that it was purposeful, that he was there. It
yes.
wasn't an accident that he ran across her. And so to see how he puts the New Testament just gives value back to women.
Yes. Yep,
And how many women through time have related with this story in one way or
right,
another.
Yeah.
yes.
It's
And then
like-
here's some goofball pastor preach at the bad women of the Bible and throw her in with them. I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like almost the only way I've heard it preached is
Yeah.
that to make it seem like she was promiscuous.
Yeah.
Or,
Right.
you know, that like she was just
I guess that's the
choosing
way I kind of took
that
it.
way.
Yeah.
I'd like to
the
read
thing
it,
is
yeah.
she was probably barren.
Wasn't this this is what I was thinking is, wasn't this the story where the woman, because she was in a situation, she would have been considered stonable? And so he's had to send them away because they.
That's in John chapter 8. We're getting to that one.
That's a different.
Oh,
That's
different.
different.
Okay. That's where
Yeah.
I'm confused.
But
Yeah.
if they think that she's only, if these women are only for having their seed and
Right.
carrying the child, and if she's not doing, like you said, barren, then they're gonna, I don't want you, then somebody else will have, and then I don't want you, and somebody else,
Yeah,
I
Right.
don't want you. And there was like, I mean, I'm just imagining a lot of these people I meet in Haiti who live a similar life to this.
right.
And they're just thrown around, and they keep doing it because there's no other way for them to provide themselves, no other way for a meal, no other way for a roof over their, so.
Right, the
Yeah.
society has denied them to own land, to
Yeah,
vote,
they
to
have no
whatever,
rights, yeah.
everything they've been
Mhm.
denied,
Right.
unless you have a man to provide,
You,
because society sets you up to fail.
right,
Imagine her self-esteem.
yes.
This guy, this guy, this guy.
Yeah.
You're still.
Yep.
And then that makes her reaction, like when he does this, she has this real conversation, now she runs off and tells everybody, that make more sense. And
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Why should be so excited?
He didn't insult her.
Right.
Mm.
Right, yes.
And she didn't take it that way.
No, she
Right.
didn't.
She didn't. Her reaction shows that she didn't take it that way.
It shows you how much she was craving and for something like that to happen, like just anything, to feel that heart
Valid.
level of something.
Yeah, validation.
Yeah.
Neat new look.
Yeah. Whole new stories.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks, Janine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, then we're gonna keep going. She said he's a prophet. Remember what they were looking for in prophets?
Hindsight, foresight, insight.
Yes. Is it there, Joe?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
He says he has hindsight. You've had 5 husbands. Insight, the guy you don't have now is not even your husband. And foresight in verse 21, the hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father.
Yep.
So that proves he's the prophet for sure. Then he right away kicks into a discussion on worship. So mark it somehow, choose a mark for worship. You could be a music note or whatever you want. If you put a music note, know that worship is a lot more than singing, but that just might be a reminder mark for you. So he talks about worship, and there is, guess what? Realer than real worship. There's real worship, but the realer is if you worship in spirit and in truth.
Right.
Another realer than real shows up right here. Okay, I'm going to skip that because I want to get done. You guys can study it. Verse 25, the woman said to him, I know that the Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When that one comes, he will declare all things to us. And Jesus, for the first time, said to her, he revealed himself, he revealed his true nature, his God nature to a woman in a woman-hating society. And then she becomes a minister.
Yeah.
And goes out and talks. So she runs out. Turns out the disciples come back and say that he was talking with a woman. Were they thinking Old Testament?
Well, Greek culture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Right.
At least.
They weren't thinking Old Testament because that's not in the Old Testament. They were letting their Greek culture influence show through.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to speak with a woman. And he's like, I'm gonna, because that's not in the Bible. So they said, why are you speaking with her? So the woman left her water pot, went into the city and said to who?
Men,
Okay, let's don't say women can't teach men. right?
True.
Because the first time Jesus revealed himself as the Messiah, she went in and told men and they came out and believed. She started a revival in her city. Yeah,
Wow, first person he tells. Huh.
yes,
I've never thought about that.
yes. And then she goes and tells the guys. Who's the
That's
first
funny.
person Jesus talked to when he was resurrected?
A woman.
And then what'd she do?
Tell everyone.
Those guys.
Told her guys.
Went and told the guys.
Okay, now you're putting yourself on a pedestal.
Jeffrey.
I've got a question.
Okay,
In verse 27, the way my Bible has it, it says, at this point, his disciples came and they marveled that he had been speaking with a woman, yet no one said, what do you seek, or why do you speak with her? No one asked Jesus why he was doing it, according to my book here.
yep.
Okay,
My book said the same thing.
Yeah, that's what,
Yeah.
yeah.
okay, I guess I'm misunderstood. I thought you were saying that they asked him why, the disciples asked him why he was speaking with the woman.
Mine says, why do you speak
But it's
with her?"
implied that it's a kind of a shock what, they didn't say anything.
Yeah,
In other
I
words,
think they were standing there with their mouths hanging open.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
they should have said something, but they didn't want to.
If I said it wrong, sorry, Bill.
Okay, I guess, yeah, I don't know. This is
Okay,
good.
so she starts this ministry. Now, that's all awesome and cool, but I love verse 31. I love what happens in verse 31. Okay, so she's off running around telling everybody about this cool guy. And then the guys say, okay, Jesus, remember why weren't the guys there?
Getting
Because
food.
he's
They went
tired.
into town to get food because Jesus was too tired to go get food for himself. He had to sit down. So they came back, and now that she's gone, he says, okay, here's the food we got. And he said to them, I have food to eat that you don't even know about.
Realer than real.
Realer than real food.
Right.
Realer than real food. Real food could fill up his stomach, but look what realer than real food did. It literally took away that hunger for food. He said, I don't even need it anymore. Because what's his food?
To do the
What's
will of
realer than
Father.
real
Yes.
food? Yes.
And they didn't
No one
understand.
brought you anything to eat, did he? And Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his works. So awesome. I know all of us have been in a place where we are in our ministry sweet spot. Like we're just doing what we're called of God to do.
Mhm.
And when we have that, we don't get tired. You don't get burnout when you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. I tell you guys, Christian ministry burnout comes from doing something you're not supposed to do.
Mhm.
So don't do it. But when we get in this place where we're just doing what God's called us to do, man, it doesn't make you tired. It makes you energized. It's realer than real food. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, very cool.
Okay, I think we'll stop because it's time and that's a good place to stop, but you guys can study the rest of 4 for next week. There's a royal official that gets his own color. Keep track of signs. We're still going to be marking that. There's Zoe life in there and a couple of commands for you guys to keep marking on.
Oof.
Think of this. Isn't this a good one?
So
What a
good.
night.
So good.
Really good.
That Jesus just busts through all that stuff, that culture stuff. He just goes through.
Yes.
And if we didn't have that first
Right.
hour and a half or hour and 10 minutes,
Change
the
it
last
around.
15, 20 minutes would not make sense, really.
Right.
Would not make sense. Thank you for the history
We
lesson.
wouldn't have the depth.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes me happy that you said that. Yes, Brian.
That's when we read this, context is king. If you just read
The story.
in a voice like we've always heard, or a lot of us have heard,
Mhm.
you're just a slime ball. No. If that would have happened, she wouldn't have gone into town,
Right.
drug the whole town out to say, look at this guy, if he would have insulted her, there's no way
Exactly. She would
it
have
should
done
be
that. yeah.
read,
That's
because
good.
in the context, she would have just grabbed her pot of water and walked away, another bad day.
Yep.
But
Just like
that's
she
not-
was there getting water at a time of day that normally women don't go. She'll just come back at a more of a time
Yeah.
that she
Right.
won't be bothered and
When
just
it's
go
quiet.
do what she needs to do.
Right. Just makes sense when the context, you gotta read it from beginning to end to get what really happened.
Well, now it's a real story
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to us.
I mean, that's why we study this way, so that we can get that.
Another aha moment.
Yes.
Aha.
Uh-huh.
good.
Okay, Janine, there's another little, Brian, you were speaking of content and context. There is a teaching going around that uses this same story. And it's saying Jesus encountered this woman because he accepts everybody. And you can be homosexual, you can be anything you want, and you have to accept these people in the church. So this is the story that they're using to say he went out of his way to meet her, but they forget that he offered her living water, he offered her salvation, and she accepted it.
Yes.
Right.
And that's where they put a twist on this, and they make it sound, oh yeah, we are supposed to accept, but that's not the purpose of the story. Was not to say we have to accept everybody.
Right.
He offered her, the purpose of the story is he offered living water, a chance to change, and
Yeah.
she accepted it.
Yeah.
It's so
But
like-
she's also not involved in homosexuality. She's
Yeah.
with men. It's a
No,
woman-
but they use this story to say you have to accept everybody, and you don't know
Right.
who's standing next to you in your church, but you
Yeah.
have to accept them.
Oh, we do
We
accept them,
should
but
love them and
but
we
not
love
to
them.
Yes.
stay the same.
Right.
Right,
Compassion,
right. We
So
wanna
repentance
go
is important.
and disciple,
Right.
reach all,
right?
but as far as being a part
Yeah.
of the family. they
I mean,
need
the
to-
cancel culture
You wanted
says,
her to.
if you
So,
support an issue.
You guys have
Like-
heard me say this before, but what Kat's describing is a false doctrine called hyper grace.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Right,
that's,
and like come the way you are, but leave changed,
yes.
you know?
Right, right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
He met her where she was at.
Well, even
but he didn't
Jesus,
wanna leave her that way.
yeah,
Right.
even Jesus, after he healed the man by the pool of Siloam, he found him later and he says, stop sinning or something worse might happen to you. He didn't, the guy must have had a lifestyle of something that he had been doing, I don't know. But Jesus didn't want to leave him the same way, even
Yeah.
healed.
Yeah. And even the woman that Joe keeps trying to get us to think about, after all her accusers left, he said,
That
"Don't
doesn't go well.
Shirley.
Yeah.
Got a
Yeah,
million
no
things
more.
swirling in my head.
knock it off." Yeah.
To go and someone more. That's the key.
Right.
Everybody likes to skip over and glaze over like it's, oh, he forgave her, it's fine.
Mhm.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yep, very good
stuff.
tonight, Janine.
Good.
I'll bring some.
Thank you.
Oh, I won't be here
Is that
next week. No. But, metal leaves. I just got some.
Metal leaf?
I'll bring some.
For
next time I
soreness?
come.
Good to have you back, Tanya.
Good, thank you. I wanted to share with you guys about my experience with voodoo.
Oh.
You wanna hear it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so, where I was staying, in the house I was staying at, oftentimes there's a wall around your space with a gate that's locked and secured. And that's generally like houses there, that's what you have security, if you're not like in a shack or a tarp or wherever. You have a house, you have a gated area. So there was a gate around it, and then often you'll have a space on top on the roof where you hang out. That's your outdoor space. It's safer to be on top, away from access from other people. So anyway, my room the wall is behind my room. And on the other side of this brick wall is a church with a community of little huts and stuff that are with it. And it was a voodoo community. And so literally my wall, that's them. And if I'm on the roof, I'm seeing it, right? So almost every day, all day long, I'm hearing the voodoo stuff going on. Especially on Fridays and Saturdays, it's like never ending. And a lot of times they'll go down in their whatever makeup and outfits and stuff down the street. And they'll have animals with them and they'll be chanting as they're going down because they're going to do some ceremony. We're going to sacrifice those animals and stuff. So anyway, I'm hearing this all the time. So for me, there was some really weird spiritual attack battle kind of things that I experienced, but I knew right away. So I would put on my worship music in my MP3 player, or I would plug in your videos. I would watch some of your videos, or I would do some of my online church. I would do church at the time that it was at its worst to offset it. And I would actually be praying like crazy over our space and then over them, right? But so being that this is the culture, like all my other times in Haiti, and the other spaces I've been at, you always heard it, but it was in the distance. It's never been this close, right? So anyway, I went to there was a museum nearby, and it taught you about the voodoo culture and how it was brought into Haiti. So, and I knew some of this already, but it kind of tied it all together. So originally when Columbus landed and they took over the island, they enslaved the original islanders, the people that were there, and eventually they all died off. So then they brought the slaves over from Africa. And so the majority of Haitians now are from African descent. Many of them believing that they are from tribes, from some of those the 12 tribes, many of them, because they were brought from Northern Africa, which a lot of the tribes had gone into along the way. So many believe that they are. And they could be right. I'm not going to say they are or not. I just know that that's what's been passed on through generations. But then from Africa came the voodoo. So when the slaves were brought over, a lot of the voodoo was brought over. And so when the battles were happening and the Spanish and the French were fighting over the island, Spain took the Dominican side, French took the Haitian side, and like the mountains kind of divided. Well, the French forced the slaves to be Catholic, but they call it over the table, under the table. So over the table, the slaves had taken all their voodoo stuff and replaced it with the images of the Catholic religion. So where it appeared they were practicing Catholics, they were truly continuing on with their voodoo. And so like where they say that Haiti's not part of the 4% and under, they're saying they're Christians, but they are not. The majority are continuing to be voodoo, and very few are actually Christian. And I do find that to be true when I'm out there and stuff like that. So anyway, I just giving you guys some background of what we're dealing with out there. It's really strong, and I've always experienced it, but this time I experienced it the most. And yeah, it was the place I'm going to be renting is actually 2 blocks down the road, so I will not be neighbors with them, which will be better.
I didn't know you were going back.
Yes, this opened up some opportunities. So I'll be going back in July, and over the next 18 months, tentatively, because with Haiti, anything can happen. I'll be there probably about 11 months out of the 18 months, and it'll be back and forth, like 2 to 3 months there, 4 to 6 weeks here, back, then back, then back, then back. Because I'm building leadership teams within, because we're not going to try to bring teams, at least not in the foreseeable future. We're going to build them within, which is the way it's supposed to be doing. And it's the model we're using in the Middle East right now too. Building who's already there, training them up, and then having them lead. So I'm going to build leadership teams and release it to them as it should be. So, but there's a lot of connections that I've made all over Haiti. So hopefully I'll go from one to the other, to the other, to the other, but back and forth life, which is way better for me because family's here, grandchildren are here. So I always, and most of my support system, so you can have constant. So that's the new news. So we'll see how it plays out. So
Are you with a small team too?
No, it's just me.
It's just you.
I originally went with our team from Grace Fellowship,
All right.
but then I went as a volunteer. Then I kids asked me on staff, so then I became on staff. Left the career, went on staff. So now Grace Fellowship is no longer involved, other than that they're my sending church. And I'm solo, so But I have my whole kids community, we're all over the world, but none of them have ever been there with me yet. And I don't know if they will be. I'm building it up with all their stuff, but like I said, I'm gonna use Haitian, I'm gonna build it up within the Haiti community, not with teams from all over the country like we generally would do. So so I'm building it. I have a lot of contacts out there. A lot of people have gotten to know, a lot of people I think will be on the leadership team and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Tanya, you're rocking it.
Yeah.
Oh, God is
Yeah.
anyways. Most of the time I'm going, okay, what are we doing? How am I gonna do it?
Yeah.
You know, but hey, my Creole gets a lot farther when I'm there. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, you gotta like
Oh,
speak
yeah.
slower, please, and I'll get what you're saying, but
Wow.
The more you're there, you know, and
the
everything.
more I'm there, the more I'll get
pick
it.
it up.
And then I'm thankfully in this particular community, there's enough of them that speak some English that helps a little bit. But so that like if you can't get it, the conversation going, you can ask them to come over and what are we missing here? You know, that kind of thing. While I get better, then I'll just keep using translators for a while, but
Are you working with the orphanage?
that wasn't the focus on this
No.
one. It wasn't, but yes, we were with the group home
What's
children
the
a
girl's
lot, but
name?
that was not the focus.
Amy?
Amy's yes. So I'll be living with Amy. We're gonna team up. She's got her own nonprofit. I work for another. So because we're both Americans from the US, we're able to come alongside each other, share security, share living space, share the car, you know, share that kind of stuff, but support each other as we're both. So that's, so God completely orchestrated that. So. it'll be good.
Awesome. Put 1,000, you put 10,000.
Undertaker.
That's really cool, Tanya.
Yeah.
Really cool.
So, yeah. So anyway, being here today was really good, but it was just like everything you were talking about, I'm just thinking everything there, and it's just like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm just like feeling very, like, a lot of emotion going through that, yeah. Yeah. So lots of prayers, especially for them who are trying to fight against the voodoo.
Wow.
It's real.
Yeah.
And the way they treat women just makes me think of passed down from the Greeks. It just, that's how they are out there. And if they truly are from the tribes, it just kind of connects that they were the what part of the 10 that were in that kind of culture, and it's just continued on.
The guys are real macho.
I'm not saying there's not good ones, there are, but most of them are just slime balls. They're not good.
Superiority.
They're awful.
Hmm.
That's
Well,
why you have all the gangs and all the corruption and everything.
That's why a lot of Latino women, when a guy comes down from the United States, they're attracted to him because they don't have that macho, the machismo persona, and as much as the culture is, and not that there's not down here also, but it's real prevalent.
Well,
down
that's
there.
true, like I was in the military life for many years, and all the places that they would go to work, generally the ones that were attracted were ones that were not being treated well in their own culture, so it's like Americans, get us out of here kind of thing.
Mm.
Happened a lot.
Yeah.
You guys are my favorites.
Love you.
Yes,
Love you.
All right, Scotty.
See you,
Bye,
church.
Janine.
Thanks
Bye,
for
Nicole.
tuning in.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See you
Bye.
guys.
Love you.
I love you too.
Yes,
Dawn.
very good. Thank you, Janine. Thank you. It's very
See
good.
you, Kat.
Good
Yeah,
night.
bye.
Bye.
Lynn, we have to get off. We're gonna get booted, so I'm gonna get off and we can talk if you want.
Well, it's getting late here, so
Okay.
I'll,
right.
thank you.
Yeah. See you later.
Okay, good night.
Bye.